afternoon, everyone. Apologies for the slight delay. The Chief Constable badly needed a sandwich, so we thought we'd better let him have a sandwich before we started. But you're all very welcome to this seminar session on how can national thinking on neighbourhood policing deliver locally. We have completed, as some of you will know, a series of seminars over the last year looking at a range of issues relevant to policing and service delivery to the public. And of course we had hoped, as we hope every month, that by now we would have had our full board back up and running. But in the meantime we have been working, the independents have all been working to try and keep the debate focused on policing issues, and in particular the policing matters which affect the community most. One of those, I suppose, is the neighbourhood policing. And it's even evidenced by the number of people here today. It is an area which matters greatly to the public. Some of you would have been here in September 2017 when Dr. Rick Moore gave us his thinking on the issue, and he talked about the changes which have happened nationally in the delivery of neighbourhood policing, and about the shift in number of officers from neighbourhood policing to other situations. And of course we can understand that to a certain extent. No organisation can remain the same. Funding pressures and new demands mean that resources have to be looked at and realigned, and there's always a need to see if we can do things differently. And to review and modernise is as much a matter for the police service as it is for every other service. So today we're coming back to the issue, and we're delighted to be joined by Deputy Chief Constable Gavin Stevens from Surrey Police, who has had the challenge and the privilege of being the national lead on the development of new guidelines for policing services. We're really interested to hear what you have to say, Gavin, about national thinking. We know that austerity measures have had a major impact on police funding over the last number of years, and that neighbourhood policing has suffered as a result, and I think the latest reports show that 1 in 7 neighbourhood policing posts have been lost because of the need to transfer resources elsewhere. We know that there have been changes over the years to our policing structures, but community was always a central tenet of policing reform programme, and it is one that has helped to build community confidence, and we don't want to lose that. So unsurprisingly, there's a real strength of feeling around the role and the work of neighbourhood teams. And I know from my knowledge of most of you in the room that we will have lots of questions today. And you know that we didn't have a video to start with. We thought we'd go straight into Gavin's talk, and then we'd go straight into discussion. So you have plenty of time to think up the kind of questions you would like to ask. After we hear from Deputy Chief Constable Stevens' contribution, I'm good about demoting people in the police. Sorry about that. We're going to head from him over to ACC Alan Todd, and he'll tell us about the delivery model and the PSNI and the plans that we have for going out to public consultation around policing services, and also how the national thinking will affect our thinking here. Amanda Stewart, Chief Executive, will manage proceedings from here on. But before I hand over to DCC Stevens, I'm still demoting you, want to note that there are no alarms or anything like that planned for today. If you don't want to have your photograph taken, please see a member of staff from along the back row, because photographs are being taken as we go along. Thank you for taking the time to come, because this is a very important issue for everybody. It's hard to get it right. We never have enough officers to do what everybody wants the police service to do, so we have to make best use of what we've got. So without taking up any more time, I'm going to hand over to you, Gavin, Chief Constable. I could make you now with that help, and you'll share your perspectives with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne. Good afternoon, everybody. And should we just say Gavin, and probably makes it easier with the titles, doesn't it? So, thanks ever so much for the invitation to speak here today and to share with you what's happening with the new national guidelines. This is a bit of a trail for them, really. They were launched with Chief Constables earlier in the year, but the public launch for the guidelines is not until next month, where they'll be accompanied with some sort of practical advice from the College of Policing as well. And I ought to just say that it has been a privilege to lead the work on the national guidelines. Neighbourhood policing is my real passion. That probably comes from my sort of community upbringing in the northeast coast of England. So that strong belief that we need to work hard to earn the trust and confidence of our communities runs deep through my sort of policing career. And that idea that ideally we can get communities to work with us to make them safe but also feel safe is really important to me. And I have a strong belief that without that, the rest of our policing mission becomes so much more difficult. But of course the mission has broadened a lot in recent years, and there have been some challenges to it. In the early part of my career, I was fortunate to be involved in growth in policing. The National Reassurance Policing Programme, which led to the National Neighbourhood Policing Programme, led to big investments in policing. And in England and Wales, an investment in 16,000 PCSOs. In fact, I remember the debate with colleagues in the Treasury about did we want 21,000 PCSOs or 16,000 PCSOs, and how times have changed. And it's not only the reduction in finance that's changed, the sort of austerity measures, but the policing challenges have morphed and changed at the same time, and of course policing models have changed to try and keep up with that. But of course what's happened as a consequence is that our communities have noticed differences in our policing models. They've noticed that the community policing, the neighbourhood policing, was not as it used to be, and they've made their views clear. Inspectors have also picked up on this as well, and in repeated inspections from Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary, Fire and Rescue Services, for a number of years they've commented on the difficulties that neighbourhood policing has faced, the reduction in problem-solving skills, the amount of investment in training, so on and so forth, and it led to a national recommendation in the end of 2016 to look afresh at the guidelines behind this. So these were some of the headlines that were coming from, I guess, community concerns, and the sort of commentary that the inspectorate put on it was that they noticed an erosion in service. But as I mentioned, it's not just an erosion in service, it was a change and a reprioritisation of resources, a move from public space crime and concerns to much more reporting of what was going on behind closed doors in private space, whether it's rising numbers of domestic abuse crimes, child sexual exploitation, modern slavery, online offending. All of these led to a stretch on policing resources and a shift of the sort of policing mission and what we were investing. In my own force, just to sort of give a small example of it, only about 10 or 15% of what comes into our contact centre, our first point of contact on the phones, is crime, 10 or 15% crime. 35 to 40% health and social welfare issues. So other services are feeling the pressure as well and withdrawing from some of these spaces. Police officers are stepping in, and of course our neighbourhood policing teams are at the forefront of that, trying to wrestle community engagement activity with case management of vulnerable individuals, with longer term preventative problem solving. So it's none the wonder really that they were getting confused about what their purpose was, and of course communities were noticing and inspectors were picking up on it too. So that led to the need to develop new guidelines, and I was pleased to be asked to chair the committee to do that. I'll speak more about how the committee is composed in just a moment, but we got through an awful lot of work in quite a short space of time. We were very keen, as the College of Policing would be, to make this evidence-based. So we looked at 1,600 studies, international studies, some UK-based, some overseas. We put a call for practice out, so we wrote to all forces and partner organisations to say, tell us about your current practice. What do you think is working well in neighbourhood policing? What ought we to build on? And we got over 200 responses to that. And then the job of the committee, supported by staff within the college, was effectively to wade through that and try and write guidelines that were based on evidence of what actually works. I'll be clear, when we're not sure that the evidence is strong, to say so and define what we need to work on next to sort of continue to develop this practice. And of course, the Inspectorate, Majesty's Inspectorate, have made a follow-up recommendation in the latest national report to say that now that the guidelines are out there, forces should assess themselves against them and come up with plans for how they need to respond. Just a brief word on the guideline committee, because I think it's only the second time that this approach has been used. The first time was for a piece of work looking at police restraint and use of force. And I think the fact that we had a mixture of academics, subject matter experts and policing practitioners really brought a richness to the debate around what the guidelines should be. Seeing professors debate with PCSOs and neighbourhood constables about what works and doesn't work was quite a life-affirming thing, actually. And to hear reminders of the simply excellent work that is still going on in many of our communities in neighbourhood policing was a good reminder that although we're seeing that erosion and although we're seeing the shift in policing mission and a broader range of challenges, actually there is some fantastic practice out there that we need to capture and make sure that we share more widely. One of the things that there was a clamour for was a definition. Because what's become clear is that with the stretch on resources, some forces have called policing functions neighbourhood policing when it's not. And of course you can have a neighbourhood policing ethos, you can have a policing with communities ethos that should run right through the organisation within every member of staff, that we are here to serve and protect our communities, to make them safe and make them feel safe. But there are certain functions, certain key features that need to be present for it to be neighbourhood policing as our communities understand it and as we understand it for what it's seeking to achieve. And that's what's on the screen here. Now there's more detail on these in the guidelines themselves, and I know there's some copies available here today. And of course our communities and our teams that work in this, they notice when some of these key features are missing. It's also reflected in the Policing 2025 Vision 2. That talks about integrated working, and I think that's relevant at place level. So you're working with a range of partners, volunteers, third sector and so on at place level, but also to think of integration at a neighbourhood to national level, because of course one of the very important features of our policing model is that we are able to connect a neighbourhood officer to national security issues in a matter of minutes if we need to. And that thread that runs through policing, I think, is really important for global security issues. The guidelines then are split into three areas. Those on delivering neighbourhood policing, those on supporting neighbourhood policing, and how we want to seek to develop it from here on in. On the delivery front, I'll give a plug for a new report that was just released on Monday and is actually formally launched tomorrow, which is a Police Foundation report written by Andy Higgins, who's the lead researcher there. Andy was a member of our guidelines committee and gave very valuable input to it. And I'll use an analogy that Andy gave about the delivery of neighbourhood policing, and he described it as a pizza, whereby the base has got some common ingredients, and the common ingredients of delivery of neighbourhood policing are that it needs to have strong community engagement, it needs to have strong problem solving ethos, a clear focus for the issues that you try to understand why they're happening and to find a resolution to them, and it needs to have joint agency working. So every pizza has the same base, as it were, but the toppings are many and varied depending on the context in which you're working. So if I take my own county in Surrey, the southern half of the county is very rural, and the neighbourhood teams will be dealing with rural and heritage crime issues and speeding concerns with the local villages, so on and so forth. Where in the northern half of the county, which is effectively the southern part of London, we might be dealing with diverting young people from gang crime and violence. And of course the range of interventions that are needed to do those things are very different, but the core ingredients of dealing with harm reduction through community engagement, good problem solving skills and working together with others are common. On the support front, what we say is that the right culture needs to be promoted and it needs to be supported with the right machinery, if you like. So this is strong operational and political leadership and community leadership at all levels to get behind this collective endeavour, and to make sure that we invest in some of the mechanics that are needed to support the endeavour of neighbourhood policing, including the professional development of the teams that are involved in it. And of course the final guideline, we recognise that actually we haven't got a strong evidence base for everything that we're trying to do, and more on that in just a moment. So you'll be pleased to know I'm not going to go into the detail of all the guidelines. There are copies that you can look at and take away, and as I say, there's going to be some practical advice that follows next month. But on these first three about delivering, I was struck by a comment from one of the professors that we worked with that sort of described the essence of this. And he said, well look, communities really, they want to be safe and they want to feel safe. They want to be policed but not over-policed. And when resources are limited, there are three key things that we ought to try and do. And the first is to have a strong enough relationship with our local communities to find out what really matters to people in their area, and have an honest dialogue with them that we can't do everything, so we need to choose. When you've chosen what's important, we really need to try and get to the root causes of what's happening. Continually ask those questions, why? The essence of good problem solving, and of course there's a really strong international evidence base about problem solving. And then finally work collectively to try and tackle those root causes. So that's the gist of the first three guidelines on delivery really, and I thought that was quite a neat description from one of our academic colleagues on summing that up. The bit about supporting neighbourhood policing, these are the things that need to be in the background to make sure it stands a chance of being successful. And of course I've mentioned that sort of vocal and visible political and operational leadership and community support for it. That focus on good analysis to be able to get to that question about why things are happening, that real sort of root cause issue. And really I think about analysis at three levels. At the first level, it's just expecting every one of our officers and staff, whether they're on a neighbourhood policing team or a detective in CID or working on safeguarding, to stop and think about why something might be happening. And if they've been there before, maybe a second or third time, to think why it is that they might be coming back to that issue. And that leads to the sort of first level of analysis, if you like. At the second level, I think about having sort of self-service tools that officers can use to try and understand problems more, and of course investment in new technology is a key feature of that. And at the third level, sometimes they need professional analytical support. And a fantastic example of this is last year's international problem-solving winner from Cincinnati. Some colleagues out there that were dealing with place-based violent crime, and all of the videos and material are online at the International Problem Solving Awards, and to see the analytical insight that they had from some professionals to help them understand the problem and tackle it and effectively get rid of the gun crime problem in 3 neighbourhoods in Cincinnati was jaw-droppingly brilliant, and you can see why they won the international award. And of course the final one here is about continuous professional development, and certainly in my own force I know that all of the learning and development money in recent years has gone to safeguarding activity and improving our skills there. And we're now beginning to think again, probably not before time, that we need to keep refreshing the skills of our neighbourhood teams too. And then the final guideline is really about recognising that we don't understand everything about what works and what neighbourhood policing teams are doing at the moment. We know from the call for practice that teams are out there tackling vulnerability, doing follow-up visits to victims of domestic abuse, working on child sexual exploitation, and working hand in glove with missing persons teams. They're doing work on serious and organised crime by having ownership over local serious and organised crime offenders in their community, and preventative work on counter-terrorism. They're also doing lots of engagement online, preventive activity online, and that's one of my other national responsibilities. But hand on heart, do we really understand what works and what doesn't work in this arena? No, nothing like in the same way that we do with the international evidence base around problem solving. So we've got a structure for how we're going to continue to develop it. I went to Chiefs Council in January to sort of pitch the new guidelines and asked for sort of half a dozen volunteers to help us develop it. As of yesterday, we've had 21 volunteers and more coming each week, so we're pretty overwhelmed with support. So we're going to have some regional groups to share best practice, and I've got a thematic lead for each of those evidence gaps to keep the work developing. And as I say, we'll continue to develop more practical examples for use by local teams to help them with the implementation. So a quick look ahead to the future. We want to do more to learn from each other, to learn from the report that Andy and the Police Foundation has done. And of course we all recognise that we've got limited resource to invest in this area. We've got tough policing choices to make, But what we want to be clear is what we do choose to invest, we want to invest it wisely and invest it on the back of a good evidence base to make sure that we get the right outcomes for our communities and that we are actually making them safer and making them feel safe too. And as I mentioned, we want to learn more about how neighbourhood policing deals with the new threats that our communities are facing, whether that's being victims of online crime, the issues of vulnerability, and how we deal with issues such as counter-terrorism and serious and organised crime. So much more work to do, but I do hope that the new guidelines will give us some clues to how to steer the path ahead over the coming months and years. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Alan Todd, and I'm the Assistant Chief Constable in charge of local policing in PSNI. And it's a pleasure to be here and talk to you a little bit about the PSNI context on some of what Gavin has already said this afternoon. We have been doing some work in local policing for some months now as to how we might meet some of the very challenges that Gavin has outlined in his presentation here already this afternoon. And just to put that in context for you all, there's a bit of a double whammy for local policing in PSNI, as really has been reflected by Gavin as well, because in common with a lot of police services, not only in the UK but across Western Europe, policing budgets have been decreasing over recent years in line with public expenditure stresses and strains. And so we're just a microcosm of that. And each year when the chief comes, and the fact is each year is a challenge on its own, but we'll not go there. But each year when the chief gets that envelope with the check inside it, it says how much money we have to place on Ireland in the coming year, generally about 2 weeks with about two weeks notice, and that doesn't cause any problems. But when you get that check has been smaller each year for the last 5 or 6 years. So it's a lot smaller now than it used to be. And we put lots of numbers around that, and how many, 180 million and all sorts of things, but it's a lot of money. And with the organisation being 85% of our people goes on, 85% of our money goes on employing people, then that puts a lot of pressure on our resources. So for somebody like me who has responsibility for delivering local policing, my share of George's check is smaller, or is a smaller check than it used to be. So when the chief divvies up the checks and hands it around the table, my check has been getting smaller too. But there's a second pressure around that, because as Gavin said, the nature of demand on local policing is changing. The nature of demand on PSNI is changing. And what we would have thought of traditional crime, dealt with in traditional methods by visible uniformed cops out on the streets, is shifting to that non-visible space. Online exploitation, serious and organised crime, people being exploited, people being trafficked, drugs in communities. The whole social shift in healthcare from care in hospitals to care in the community has completely changed the dynamic. And if you ride in the back of a police car now on a Saturday night, I can tell you it's very different to the police cars I used to ride in the back of 20 years ago when we were dealing with the streets in Northern Ireland 20 years ago. The amount of vulnerability, drug and alcohol abuse, deprivation, and social and healthcare inequalities is much greater now than it was when I was a constable and sergeant some years ago. And that has changed and reflects how the challenges changed coming to my people. Now, I always have to remind people, because it's always the sort of nature of the job that I do, that you're always constantly looking at things that aren't working and attempt to try and get them to a place where they are. But I always remind, because I find myself having to remind myself on a daily basis, that there's not a day goes by in local policing that I don't look at the current sheets from the previous 24 hours, and you just can't not be proud of the work that local officers do in communities up and down the streets of this province every day and every hour of every day and every week. And some of the things when we go along to, and I know the chair recently was at one of the award ceremonies, in fact a couple of award ceremonies have been done recently, you can't not be impressed by the complexity of some of the things that our officers face and the skills with which they bring to address them. But even there, you see a real shift in what we're being asked to deal with. And I was particularly struck when I was down in Creaven Civic Centre for one of the award ceremonies 3 or 4 weeks ago, about the sheer percentage of awards being given to officers who had saved people's lives. I said sort of quippingly afterwards on the awards that you could sort of divide the awards night into 2 broad categories. There were several busloads of people who are still with their families and still with us generally, who would not have been with us had it not been for the intervention of the police service. And then there's other busloads of people who would still been on the streets and still been locked up as we should have been, because that's a lot of the work that we do too. But that balance has really shifted over time. And the number of those awards, it started with the words, police attended the following person who was vulnerable for the following reasons, and attended to their needs because ambulances were unavailable, or healthcare were unavailable, or social service were unavailable. But we stepped into that space, and that person is still with us as a result of us stepping into that space. Rather than being the exception in the work that we do, has become the norm, and has actually become a big percentage of our work. So it's reassuring when we talk to the policing board about crime being amongst its lowest levels in many, many years, but the complexity of what we deal with is far more complex than it used to be. So we can say that whilst crime is down, and Gavin alluded to it earlier, whilst crime is down, like Gavin, PSNI's calls for service through the contact management, about 16% of our demand is actually crime. And then there's a big 50 or 60% piece, which is around protecting the vulnerable, concern for safety, keeping people safe. And the complexity of doing that and the time that it takes to deal with individual cases has shifted consistently. And to sort of illustrate the point, it's a long way from being a 1 hour or a half hour call with a response mobile that goes to a local retailer to the report of a shoplifting, and we still do that, and arrest the person and bring them in, process and charge it before the court, and we still do that. But that has become a smaller part of our business, while they spend 2 hours with a person who's vulnerable, take them to A&E, support the health staff for 4 hours in A&E whilst it gets resolved there, has become a much bigger part of our business. So whilst the crime numbers and some of the calls for service go down, the complexity and the length of time it takes to resolve the calls that we do is going up. So that all plays out at that very operational level on a day-to-day basis into my world when it comes to making decisions and choices. So when I have a smaller budget, I also have this shift in demand. And actually that takes some of the demand for specialisms, because these are more and more specialist skills, more and more complex problems, takes it away from those places where uniform officers routinely deal with that type of work, into the worlds of Barbara and Stephen, my other colleagues across here, who have specialist support to my business area with their specialists. So actually what happens is I need to support them in terms of their resourcing, provide those specialisms to help that wider public safety piece. But the net impact on local policing then is that I have a smaller budget to start with, but increasing demands from other parts of the business, because there are increasing demands from other parts of the public and other ways we do business. And that sets a context for the very piece that Gavin has talked about here this afternoon, about making those choices. And that's the background to our current engagement with the policing board and the members of the board who are here today and others, about how we consult with the public as to how we should use those actualities and those facts and that reality to shape how we deliver local policing going forward. Now you would expect us as a police service and senior police leaders to have some ideas as to how that might look, as to how we might do certain things in certain ways and do things differently, do more of the same, less of others, and how we make those difficult choices on many times on a structured basis so that we get a good level of service provided across the police. And of course we have ideas around that, but we're currently designing with board members and others about how we consult with the public about where the parameters for those choices might be. I don't want to go into all those. I'm happy to take some of that under Q&A, but that's the process that we're currently engaged on. So I have a range of people in this room who work on a team who are doing a huge amount of work across a whole range of work streams about how local policing is currently constructed, about the roles of neighbourhood policing teams. And you know, we didn't plan this beforehand, but you would expect to hear from me, and it's been amongst our design parameters from the start, that the HMIC's recommendation 1 of the effectiveness report, which outlines the framework for neighbourhood policing going forward, is front and centre in the considerations of the design team considering options. Gavin's own paper arising out of the college and the practice, which will come out next month, are being given to the team and saying we need to line this up nationally with where the future is, as part of our consultation, but also as part of our delivery going forward, because these are the challenges that we're trying to meet right across policing. And whilst we have our own nuances locally, the big drivers and the big structures are broadly the same in policing wherever you go, not just in the UK, but also in the Republic of Ireland and also wider across Europe, because the changes, the societal changes and the changes in public expenditure are broadly running in the same directions whichever way you turn or wherever you go. And that will require us to do and think differently. I think there are a huge range of opportunities for that. I think in terms of our policing community ethos and our practice and our philosophy, it opens up a real potential for more efficient, integrated and partnership working, to understand how collectively we get underneath the problems that are causing stresses and strains in our communities and collectively address them to the advantage of the people in the communities we serve. So I think that's the prize, and I think we have routes to get there. But the consultation is an important part of how we progress this work and how we take it into the future. So that's the context for us and where it sits alongside the piece you've just heard from Gavin. I'm happy obviously to touch on the detail and some of the questions and answers. But unless there's anything further to say, I'll leave it there and pick it up in Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alan. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Amanda Stewart, and those that have come in late are very welcome. It's always a good sign when you have to go and ask for more chairs to be brought in, which is what we expected for this particular session, particularly given the one that we had in September when we had Rick Muir here from the Police Foundation around community policing and neighbourhood policing, and we were delighted obviously to get sight of the guidelines, which I don't think have been launched yet. So we're blazing a trail here on a lovely sunny day in Belfast. But I'm going to ask Alan and Gavin to come up and to join the panel and get ready for the questions. What I would ask you to do with our open mic, and I'd urge really just for those that are joining us in the live stream, if you can wait on that mic to come to you and indicate to me if you want to ask a question. I will certainly facilitate that, and we've got lots of time, unlike some of the other seminars. We hope to be finished up, taking maybe the last question about 1:45, so that we're out of here by 2 o'clock. So I keep a wee eye on the time, but hopefully everybody will get a question. So Gavin and Alan, if you want to come up, thank you. Just while people are maybe gathering their thoughts, I am going to take the liberty of asking maybe just a question, both to Alan and Gavin. Gavin, your slide, and I noticed it actually because I had a look last night at Surrey business plan, but in the slide, the definition of neighbourhood policing, it refers to police officers, staff and volunteers, accessible to, responsible for and accountable to communities. What does that actually look like in practice?
Okay, so just a brief overview of the sort of Surrey policing context then. So one county council area with 11 boroughs and districts which are co-terminus with local policing teams, each of those borough and district teams led by an inspector. Of course that inspector's got broad responsibility for responding to local incidents, investigating crime that happens on that area, but also for the neighbourhood policing teams, which are much smaller in size than they used to do, but are dedicated to problem solving within the community. So that direct accountability is there in trying to understand the matters that most affect local communities, and trying to work with others to garner support to understand the real reasons why those things are happening, and then do our best to resolve them. But I guess what I'd say is that's only one level of problem solving, and with the range of threats that we've spoken about so far this afternoon, I think it needs to happen on sort of 3 levels. And some of that, when you think about vulnerability, is at a case management level. So we might have a vulnerable individual or a vulnerable family that might have multiple disadvantages, health and social care needs, might be mental health, physical health needs. And often those cases come to the attention of our neighbourhood teams, and they need to get involved in the case management of those individuals. That's different from neighbourhood policing as the guidelines describe it. What the guidelines are describing, if you like, the next level up from that, which is the community-based problem solving, understanding what's happening in a particular place and how we get underneath that and try and improve the place for everybody to live in, those that need policing services and those that don't. And then of course at the top level of problem solving activity, they're the system-wide issues that I guess we'll be wrestling with any form of policing restructure or reorganisation. So in Surrey, why is it that the top 5 locations across the county are accident and emergency departments? That's the place that you're most likely to find a police officer in the county. What do we do to solve those system-wide issues? Now, of course, that's not something that can be done by a neighbourhood policing team, not going to be done by individual case management. but it's got to be done by a collective effort between the different agencies. So I think you'll see all aspects of those, or we try to feature all aspects of those in the policing model. So.
Okay, thank you. Gavin mentioned in his presentation that obviously the guidelines that each of the police services will be assessing themselves against that. As the ACC for district policing, what would be your assessment of where you're at in terms of that model of policing at the minute?
I think where we are at the moment, Amanda, I think there's a lot of things we do well. And the presentation I shared with the board recently, I did a couple of slides on what I thought worked in the current model. So if you look at both our actual presence in communities right across Northern Ireland, I think that's really strong. I actually think we probably have retained our visibility over and above some of our more similar forces and services across the UK, because that's been our thrust and that's been our drive, and it is how we want to do business. So I think we're strong in that. I think our local accountability through PCSPs, the board, and all the other structures we have in Patent Architect is really, really strong. And I think it's also mature that there's a real challenge comes back from communities where they think we're not delivering that. And we're obviously keen to retain that as just a design red line going forward, because we think that's really strong as well. But I think you can see sometimes our attempt to do one-size-fits-all Rolls-Royce delivery right across the sphere creates service shortfalls where we're not doing enough on the really high risk, and we're doing too much on other cases that we're probably not getting a return on. So I think there's a balance around some of that piece and how we do some of our business going forward. The board members who have heard the presentation and been having other conversations recently will know that we're doing enhancements through our contact management centre around some of that service delivery, which is proving very popular with the public that we're dealing with on it. And it's things like that that create space to spend more time and more resource on more problem-based and area-based problem-solving model, which is in line with the national model. So a lot of things we do really well, but we also understand that the stresses and strains are currently in the business and where they're likely to be over time with the pressures that we face. And hence the work we're trying to do at the minute, trying to make sure we stay ahead of it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open the floor. I've got a few people who indicated to me they want to speak. If we any others? Okay, I'm going to give the privilege of the first question to one of our board members, Wendy Osborne, in the second row, and then I'm going to go to Albert at the back, and then we have one over here. So we've got three. We've got a couple at the back just first. I can go to Wendy first, the second row here. Okay, thank you. And then we have two at the back. There's a gentleman, Albert, and then Mary Lamb. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Gavin. I had read the guidelines, but actually hearing you speak about it does add another dimension to it, which is really helpful. My question is that, I mean, you're clearly saying here that neighbourhood policing remains an essential element of modern policing, and I think we would agree with that and welcome that kind of statement. But you're clearly redefining what neighbourhood policing is. And it's this perception that neighbourhood policing is seeing someone walk up the street, whereas your redefinition of neighbourhood policing is something which has much more depth to it, in terms of working with the communities where there are issues and trying to resolve those. So it is a shift in sophistication, I would say, but also quite a quantum shift in terms of how people might perceive that.
Yeah.
So perhaps you could say something about, have you seen where that shift has been made and it actually works? And how did you deal with the general public's expectations?
Yeah. So the point, I guess the point there is about the visible aspect of engagement, which we know that our communities value so much. And I think if you look at studies on neighbourhood policing, local policing, community policing, going back to the 1950s, that's a common cry that communities want to see police officers on foot in uniform that stop and talk to people at a sort of fundamental level. But of course, what we do know from the evidence is that visibility in isolation doesn't work. In fact, in some scenarios, it can make matters worse without communication, and we've certainly seen that to be the case. In fact, in the national reassurance work, we did some studies, perception studies of what communities thought of officers in uniform in the absence of community engagement, and sometimes it can signal risk and fear rather than address risk and fear. The other thing we know about visibility is that it's cognitive. It's not actually it's not a visual function. When people want to tune in to see things, and this is not just true for policing, it's true for other things that they find of importance as well, then they will see it. So hence the importance of engaging online and having that presence and accessibility online too. I'm not sure that even back in the days when we had lots of resources that neighbourhood policing or the national programme was ever just about that sort of visibility and engagement for engagement's sake. It was always about trying to understand what are the things that are undermining community safety and community confidence, and finding a way to work together to deal with those. And of course, what we see in different areas of the country is, of course, that's very context specific, very dependent, but those key ingredients that I mentioned about good problem solving skills, getting other people involved, are vital to make progress, because what's got to be at the heart of it is that you've built up enough trust and confidence to have an honest dialogue to say, actually, we can no longer do that aspect for you, but let's work with you to find somebody that can fulfil that need. Because certainly from a policing point of view, we can't do visibility and engagement as an in and out an end in itself. It's got to be more than that.
Alan, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, actually, Wendy, I think that the question's well made, because I think that's what this is. It is a shift, and I don't think we should pretend otherwise. And I think, when you're doing a public consultation on it, we should have an offering based on the shift, not trying to dress up something that isn't what we say it is. I think there's just an honesty and transparency piece around that. I would reinforce Gavin's piece around that, because that is an honest engagement, and being honest about what you can and what you can't do, and what you will try to do, and what you won't be stretching to. So I think that's my assessment of where we are with it as well. In terms, to put that into the sort of the resource versus the risk piece, neighbourhood policing is reassuringly expensive. There's lots of highly trained people with lots of experience in big numbers out doing that job. The challenge then is how you keep that there with those skills, but get something for because if you just do the visibility piece, you don't get the service delivery out of it. It becomes too expensive to sustain. The whole thing falls over. So it sort of has to be able to demonstrate the benefits of putting that percentage of the organisation's resource in that place in terms of keeping people safe. And I think over the years we have a little bit around neighbourhood policing here and nationally, that it was a good thing to do in and of itself. And if people felt it was a good thing, then it was fine. But when everything squeezes, it really has to be able to demonstrate value for money. Now, I don't think that's a negative, because I do think it can be a bit of a sort of a virtuous circle. Because people always think, well, if you give neighbourhood police this to do, that to do, and the other to do, then they won't get in time to do engagement, therefore they won't be out meeting people, and they won't understand the issues, and it undermines the sort of ethos of your model. I would contend that if you get to a place where that recurrent service delivery is done by your local neighbourhood officer, they have, that the essence of local cops going over people's doorsteps and dealing with local people's problem is the essence of engagement and understanding what the local issues are and getting underneath them, so they're not going back to that doorstep time in and time out. I also think, I do think neighbourhood cops should be managing sex offenders and violent offenders in their area. They should know who they are, what they're doing, and they should be involved in their active management rather than making that somebody else's job to do. Because those are the issues that are important to our communities, and those should be the issues that are important to neighbourhood police, that they understand that the police are here to do that role. And conversations we have with many board members of police who've been out up and down the country is, we give information to the police and then we don't see anything happening with it. Well, I would like to shorten some of that the information that goes to your neighbourhood team forms the basis of an action. The action is seen to be done by the local police and then reported back by those officers in a small neighbourhood loop in terms of that operational accountability. So I think there are opportunities out of this richer, deeper, and more complex model going forward. And it's not just about the money. I think the money's driving us to a better way to do the business, or at least certainly way to improve some of the things we currently do.
Okay, thank you. Gail, I'm going to go to the back row here. There's Albert and then Mary beside him.
Thank you. I believe it would be important to dedicate a standalone neighbourhood policing officer in each area, exclusively involved for the public. What does the panel think? That is their sole duties for they and to the whole community and feed in, and maybe release more other officers from that duty that have out around all the different areas. Thank you.
I don't think you get any argument from me or anybody else on the senior team on PSI that engagement is important. I am nervous about making it the sole responsibility of one or two individuals in a given area. I've worked in models like that before, and I think it undermines collective team responsibility about the collective of the neighbourhood team to make things better for that wider community. I'm not sure. I just don't think it's the best model. I think we need to embed that as that's how we do our business. Now, naturally, I think what happens in neighbourhood teams is the local neighbourhood sergeant targets that engagement based on the analysis, based on the problems, to get underneath the problems, and does engage and focuses the engagement key areas to understand it. But making engagement a standalone, recommendation one in all the reports is they talk about engagement with purpose, and I think that's the key in getting under this. So I'm not a big fan of just making it the preserve of a few. I think it's a responsibility of the man.
The only difficulty that is an awful lot of officers get dragged into response, and then that delivery doesn't happen, whereas the other way it would definitely happen.
Oh no, I absolutely identify with that, and that's why we have some options that we're trying to work up around this, to look at how we actually take that routine emergency and part of that really high speed response piece away from neighbourhood teams to allow them to deal with a slightly slower time, slightly lower priority, more problem solving approach. And those options are being developed, because I absolutely identify with that piece.
Yeah, I think that's clear from the evidence base that it's very hard to get into proactive preventative work if you're not quite sure where you're next going to be abstracted to. So having some separation of function is important. But of course, there are some areas, and the same is true in my own county, where we can't afford that universal provision anymore. So sometimes the accountability does spread over a wider geographic area, because we try and supplement that by this ethos that Alan's talked about. That, the inspector owns a team, and everybody in that team is expected to take responsibility for that borough or that district. Of course, the local accountability might come through a local constable or a local sergeant, but the broader ethos, the culture that I mentioned in the guidelines, is ever so important.
Okay, thank you. Mary, the second question to yourself, and then we're going to go back to the just.
I'd like to ask a question. How is your community officers chosen? Do they have long service in the area? Will they be in contact with people? Also, I have to ask the question, i.e., with problem solving, who is involved in it? Is the people that is the problem? Will they be involved in it? And who solves these problems? Who actually is involved in it?
Yeah.
Is it the community along with police officers?
Yeah.
And I have another point. 85% of the budget is spent on pay. 15 is spent on whatever. I live in an area and I see at times up to 8 or 10 landholders at the hospital. Now surely part of the social services budget is being taken up here. The police is doing their job. I have concerns about that.
Okay. Maybe I'll try and take the first 2 points and then hand over to Alan for the budget, although I've got a brief point that I can make on that. So from the selection point of view, I think you'll see different models across England and Wales for how they do that. It's certainly not length of service in my own county. It's energy and enthusiasm and interest in the role, because you need people that are committed to want to actively engage with their communities and work with other agencies. That requires a particular skill set. I think in the guidelines we've recognised actually that we, as a service in general, we haven't invested as much in that skills development as we could have done in recent years. And I know from recent conversations with the College of Policing that they will be looking to do more work in this area. On the second point about problem solving, that really depends on the problem itself. What we do know from the evidence base is that where you do get communities involved, those that are most directly affected by the problems, then the solutions are likely to be more sustainable, they'll last longer. If we work on our own in policing, we might find a short-term fix for it. We might be able to have a quick elastoplast or something, but it's unlikely to be sustainable. So the more people that you can get involved, the different perspectives that you can bring to it, and you're probably likely to properly understand the question why something is happening and get the right answer to it. And so, I mentioned Cincinnati, the International Problem Solving Award winner. That's worth looking at, because what they did there around their gun crime problem was that when something goes badly wrong, they have a serious case review. You get all the different agencies around the table and say, what did everybody know? They did a serious case review in advance. So they said, if we were going to do a serious case review, who would be around the table? That's who they got involved in their problem solving group, which I thought was quite a neat way of looking at it. I'll let Alan pick up the budget point of view, but I'll make a brief point about this our interface with healthcare, because policing and healthcare is much stronger overlap now. We've just actually started earlier this week, got a Darcy Fellow working for Surrey. It's a national award from the Health Service where somebody gets a sabbatical for a year. They get given money. It's normally within the Health Service itself. It's the first time it's been done in policing to look at some of those systematic issues. So the secondee that's coming to us is actually works in our local ambulance service and has got a year effectively to help us solve some of these wicked problems about the overlap between policing and healthcare. I don't know what's going to come of it, but we know as a collection of agencies that we've got to do something to try and address that problem.
Alan, do you want to speak very briefly on the budget there?
Thanks, we're just touching on that. The health service police demand interface, or that cars and Land Rover sitting outside A&E or indeed attending calls on behalf of the service, something goes right across the country. I do the national piece on contact management, which bumps into Gavin's world on social media and neighbourhood policing. And we did a sample set over 7 days across the UK, how much time police are doing work on or with ambulance service, and it's quite, it's just market. But we are at the end of the day in the business of keeping people safe, and that can be keeping people safe from themselves, and it can be keeping healthcare professionals safe from the patients that they're trying to treat. It's a very complex place, and at the end of the day, that's pretty much our job. And we might like somebody else to do it for us, but I think everybody in this room expects if they were at risk or under threat from somebody else in whatever circumstances, work, home or play, that the police will be there to protect them. I think healthcare professionals will pretty much expect the same. And whilst I'd like to find different ways of doing that, I don't think that's going to go away for us anytime quickly. The budget piece, it's often quoted 85%, 15%. All the other stuff's quite important. It's buildings, vehicles, fuel, heat and light. I think people do think we work in dark caves from time to time, but there's heat and light in the offices and places need to be heated. And actually the pressure that the deputy faces around a lot of this is that, we'll talk about 2.5% or 3% cuts to the budget, and everybody that assumes that's just applied across the piece. But in that 15%, there are rates bills to local councils, there are prices for vehicles, fuel prices, electricity prices. Those things are going up in price. The deputy can't really cut those bills, but you can't decide to cut your rates bill by 3%. So what happens is those bills go up, and everything else that doesn't go up gets cut by 20% to make up for the things that you can't. And that's why things like community funding arrangements become really tight for us, why we're having problems with CCTV schemes, with community warden schemes come under pressure, because all that money which sits in that 15% is under increasing pressure from all the other things that we can't squeeze. And the alternative is, if you want to fund that, then you need to go into your pay budget and reduce the number of police and staff you have, which is not a good choice either. So those are the choices we make on a day-to-day basis through priority-based resourcing programme board and other governance structures. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to actually, if you don't mind, I know the gentleman with the glasses is looking to come in, but I'm going to go to Kula first because I think you need to be away, which is going to get him to need to leave.
I'm really sorry.
You're okay.
Oh, I sorry, Billy.
I knew you would forgive him.
Sorry, Billy. Just very quickly about the money piece, I think it's indicative of cuts across all sectors, and Northern Ireland is being particularly hard hit, and some public sectors services experiencing 5% cuts as well. But anyway, that's what I'm going to ask. You talked about, Alan, that you're working on ideas with the policing board on consultation, how to consult. And it resonated with me with what you said, Gavin, about culture and the importance of participation of the public, and for the police to understand, to have quite a sophisticated understanding of how communities work and what's going on with communities, and that's been the theme of the conversation. So my question is, and I do have one, my question is about how are you going to consult specifically, and guess which bit of the community I'm going to talk about, children and young people. And I should have said something else, but anyway, children and young people. And how is that consultation going to seamlessly move into engagement, which is what this piece is about? Because one of the issues is we go in, we ask the question, then we leave, and then communities and young people don't see you again until the next time we go in and ask the question. And what the thread running through what you're saying is engagement and a relationship with the community, whoever they are. And that's where the trust is built up, particularly if you're going to be less physically visible. So the question is, what are your ideas around consulting and then engaging on a meaningful basis with children and young people, and the question is specifically for Alan.
Okay, thank you, Colin.
The first meeting that we had, the concept has been discussed with board members and chair and others over recent weeks. I think there was a meeting this morning. I'm just looking at the back row. I haven't had a full debrief on how that went, but I know there's some of my people and some of the board people looking at how we frame exactly those questions. And I'll be looking at those people to advise me. I haven't come to the table with a plan per se. I have some ideas of how we might do it. But I mean, that's the benefit of having the board in the context of the board has to be PCSB and other stakeholders, that when we design a consultation, we take all those considerations into account. And I'm looking to the team to bring back those proposals, which will hopefully make a
Yes, and I probably have quite a lot of experience.
Oh, for sure. But there is always a danger that we rock up to the table until we have all the ideas, and just, you know, and we're trying not to do that, and that's why we're in discussions with the board and others at the moment.
From a policing board perspective, I think our thinking is actually to go out and not to go out with a preconceived idea, but to go out with some parameters around a consultation document, and it is just to go out and do that listening exercise and to take an opportunity to have days like today to explain the context of policing and the changing demands. But really, from a board perspective, we're encouraging PSNI to go out and to listen as broadly as possible, and any support that you could give to us as Commissioner for Children and Young People would be greatly appreciated.
Sorry.
You okay? I'm going to go to Ballydrummond.
I'd just like to take you back, Alan. I know it sort of touched Mary's point. That's one of the questions I want to ask in regards to the resource implication on police dealing with vulnerabilities and things that actually aren't the statute responsibility of the police. And I know you're saying it's not going to change, but one of the things we're trying to manage in the Shangle is people's expectation of police services. And what they do expect is that police will come out when there's a crime being committed. And what we're hearing is that because of the constraints that may not be the case, it may not meet a threshold of solvability, or it may not be in terms of criteria or serious enough. But yet we hear constantly, and not a lot of people know, the amount of time that the police are spending doing police responsibilities that are other agencies. And I think seriously something needs to be looked drastically at how that imbalance is done, because if we're asking people to expect that when a crime's committed, a policeman may not come to you, but that's only 18%, but yet, by the way, 30 odd or 40% of the police time will be spent on dealing with someone else's problems. I think there's something needs to be looked at there, and as I say, I would be keen to hear, because I've heard that response when we visited the Call Management Centre, and I think something seriously needs to be looked at how that is redressed. The other question I'd like to do, Mary, just ask a couple, I've got the mic. the other point I'd like to ask is around, we're looking at the importance of community policing and neighbourhood teams in our community in the Greater Shangle through managing expectations. And one of the things that we'd like to know is in terms of how do you justify, what are the police doing to justify the benefits and the value? We know it, but what I'd like to see is hard evidence, research, sort of, cost analysis, whatever that is, because one of the concerns we have is that when people start to look to save money, this is one of the things that will be most vulnerable. So I'd like to be able to articulate to our community the real benefits in hard terms, what that is. And in fact, we would like to go further and have a scheme where when new recruits come in, that they're given a time to be exposed to neighbourhood policing as a first experience, particularly for new probationers in our community. So I'd like to know what's being done to actually make sure that the evidence is being gathered on the benefits and value of community policing, not be a peer brother, maybe the other elements of it, because it's critical in our community.
Okay, thanks, Willie. There's a couple of questions there, but I'm maybe going to go to the second question and look to Gavin, obviously, in terms of college of policing and just some of what you were indicating in terms of further research. So if you would take that question around the evidence of the benefits and values of neighbourhood policing first.
But the honest answer to that is we don't know enough. I was involved in some submissions to the Home Office on the last spending round in the sort of late summer, early autumn of last year, and we can't, in the same way as other policing functions, put an exact cost and an exact benefit next to it, because sometimes it's not monetary. So for me, one of the sort of key measures of this type of policing activity is how confident communities feel. And actually many organisations would give a lot to get to the level of confidence that we get in local teams. And I think it's similar here to it is in my own force. High 80s, low 90% confidence in their local teams, and communities can make the distinction between confidence in the local teams and confidence in the policing institution, which sometimes they don't have a lot of. So they'll say, I don't like Surrey Police, but I've got real confidence in my local policing team. One clue though is the work of the Early Intervention Foundation. So they've put some real hard cash numbers on the cost of late intervention. So in other words, if you're not doing that proactive preventative work, this is what it's going to cost you further down the track. So they're definitely worth looking at. But one of the gaps that we want to fill in that guideline, the final guideline, is exactly that. We'll understand more about cost benefits. So we'll be reaching out to academic partners to work with us on that.
And I think, to be fair, there's a particular nuance within Northern Ireland in terms of the value of communication. So I'd be interested to know what the PSNI are doing, particularly with that.
Do you want to take that, and also maybe just like in into Billy's first question, which is around the responsibilities that PSNI are picking up in terms of social welfare issues?
I think you've been kind about it, man. I think there were 6 questions in there.
There were about 6.
Yeah, that's a fair given some.
And you're criticising me about value for money, Billy. The irony's not lost on me. So, attendance first. None of these things are a binary choice for us, but we will be asking questions about the value of attendance. Now, people like to go, will you call for this type of crime or will you not? Well, I always quote, I have for many years, quote an example of, if you come back to a shop or woken up in the morning and find a crack in your window pane and you've no idea who did it or when it happened and there's no CCTV. Now, if you're living on your own with your family and are really confident, feeling safe in your home, and you're 35 years of age, we might just deal that entirely to your satisfaction over the phone and you're happy and you've got the service you wanted. If you're 84 years old and living on your own and frightened your wits, I think the cops should call. So I think that what we use the 5 model and understand people's vulnerability and risk around how we task services to individuals, I think is really important. But we do need to challenge some of our custom practice. Because frankly there are areas of Belfast where we send 2 Land Rovers and 6 police officers around for something that could be, and probably people might even prefer to be dealt with in another way, either by phone or actually emerging way through social media contact and through online reporting. So I think we need to make all that available in terms of choice. And I think over time, as that develops, we will be encouraging people, and this is, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all around this, because I think if you live in Cumbraha Street and you want to down to Tanner Street and talk about crop rather than have to crawl around your house, I guess you're fine. It's a wee bit different, you're from Anna, so it's a bit more tricky. But we need to build a model that makes provision for that. But we also need to try and encourage people to do things differently, because doing it differently creates a space to provide the very service and very problem solving people want. And that's where the choices come in. So I wouldn't want anybody leaving the room here today says the police aren't investigating this anymore. They're certainly not coming out for that. It needs to be more nuanced than that. But there will be shifts in places and time. We found from before, we probably didn't push it, maybe we should have at the time, as time will tell, where we were doing appointments for people to come in and see a police officer at a time they're duty in the middle of the station, as opposed to just taking your chances when a police car rocked up at the door when they were free. And actually that was quite well received by the public, and I think we probably need to do some more of that. We've had a number of tests with more telephone-based investigation with police officers, fully trained investigators, talking to people and resolving those issues over the phone, based on solvability and other factors, to the satisfaction of the person concerned. And I think we probably need to do more of that, because it's doing more of that that gives us space to do the things that we need to do here. So I think you'll see some of all of that change going forward. But those are elements to the consultation. I would say we've been doing the sort of telephone investigation piece on a pretty small scale around Belfast and some of the outlying districts now for 10 or 12 weeks. And the satisfaction, and we're doing individual callbacks to all those people who use it, and the satisfaction, and people are giving us good or better in 90+% of the cases. And those where they're not happy, we look at why they're not happy and see how we better deal with it. So I think those are the things we need to explore, because we can't afford to stand still, because time's overtaking us and demands overtaking us, and it will fall over if we don't do things differently going forward. So I think those are some of the challenges out of that. And as for the learning piece out of it, one of the reasons we really don't know the success of some of the neighbourhood policing is we never really codified what success looked like in the first place. I think the work of Gavin and others really says, if this is what success looks like, it actually gives you a framework for measuring how successful you are at doing it, and I think that's a piece of work that's going to develop for us.
Okay, thanks
I
very
think that
much.
was 3 of the 6. I'm
I
sure
think
there's one
the
or
answer
two.
is 3. And maybe if we get time, we'll come back to the others. Barbara, you were next, and then we have a question which is coming on social media, and Johnny Byrne then had a question, and we have another one at the front. So, sorry, is it Linda? Linda first.
Thank you. Just in relation to the community engagement, Gavin, how exactly does that happen? And is it done directly with the community, or is it done through statutory and voluntary organisations? Because whilst they may well represent certain elements within the community, they're not the community.
Yeah, and I think certainly in my own county, this is one of the areas where we've seen the tension arise, because when we were resource rich, of course, we used to do a lot of engagement for engagement's sake, to lots of community groups, voluntary groups and so on, which we can no longer service in the same way. And managing their expectations, having that trust to be able to do that has been really important. I think the answer to that question is it depends on the problem. So if it's a system-wide problem, one about how our organisation is structured, then that's with the other statutory agencies, voluntary sectors involved. If it's a local sort of place-based issue or a thematic issue for a particular community of interest, then it absolutely has to involve them directly, because otherwise you're missing part of the picture. So I think it's I always start from what's the problem that you're trying to solve, what's the objective that you're trying to achieve, and then you build the engagement that you need specific to that, rather than a universal engagement offering, which I know some of our communities are uncomfortable with. They're not. So in my own county, neighbourhood watch coordination committees who are not getting their local officer there every month to every meeting, because actually there's no need. They don't need that level of support anymore.
Thank you.
Do you want to come in and just comment on that from a PSNI perspective?
I think members and people in the room are pretty familiar with how we do that piece of business, and we're not really looking to fundamentally shift away from that going forward. I do think there are different. I think we have a slightly different dynamic. I don't know Surrey well, but the piece that I always look over my shoulder with, Linda, is that Northern Ireland, in its position as it matures in post-conflict society, if we back away from the engagement piece and aren't in that space, others will fill the space for us. And people that don't have a good intent for the wider society. So that's a pressure that we face that perhaps isn't faced to the same extent. I won't speak for Gavin, he's reached himself. But that's a constant challenge for us, so that's why we don't want to vacate that space. And Linda, you and I and others have had various meetings recently about how we widen the strategy to the community, and how we do the piece that sits in the placement plan within the Fresh Start around community co-design and involvement. And I think that's an existing challenge that we need to develop going forward.
Okay. You want to come back, Nels? Have we a microphone there? Just thank you.
I suppose just in relation to what you're saying there, there still is that concern that there's too much with the statutory and with the voluntary organisations. And I've said this before to yourselves, there are examples of good practice in some areas being done by your own officers, and I think that should be rolled out, that conversation should be had with those officers who have good engagement with the communities at the very base level, directly with the community. And I think that conversation needs to be had within the PSNA. And the evidence is there. The evidence is there within those communities. So if you're talking about my own area of Coal Island, the evidence is there where there has been good engagement with the PSNA and all of the statutory and voluntary as well, but also with the community in the room. Where issues they have been addressed properly, and the evidence is there to show that it works. So I think those kind of things need to be looked at and rolled out.
Linda, that's not lost on me. And actually, much of what we discussed here today is to make sure that as the financial pressure and resource pressures increase, we don't lose that. And that's one of the design principles around that. We're not about changing that. We're about trying to create the space to continue going forward, because we know it works. But if we don't change the way we run the risk of losing that, and that's half the driver around the back of it.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Have we other questions there in the front row? I thought I seen other hands going up, but maybe I didn't.
Just while Barbara gets the mic there, perhaps. Billy, the one of your 6 questions I didn't answer was about the partner piece. For sure, we're doing a lot of work with partners to try and move all those things forward, but we can't sort of switch it off today. No cop's going to sit in the station because it's somebody else's job to protect the person on the street, and we're just not the people who are going to refuse to go to that. It's just not in our psyche. But you should take reassurance We have a number of concern hubs which we've developed across various council areas across the country, where we are taking people who regularly come into our organisation in terms of demand or requirements, and we're looking collectively at partners as to how we have multi-strand approaches to addressing and problem solving their issues. So that and there's really good emerging, and David Beck's at the back there, some of the work of that. There's good emerging evidence that that works with people who used to ring us 40 times a week and now don't, because actually the needs have been met generally through other partners, not through us. We were picking up the demand, other people have picked up the actions. We've done something about that, we've moved that forward. There's other good examples around the work that will start in Belfast Custody Suite this autumn, which is a partnership between, we've just got £500,000 funding co-funded between DOJ and the Department of Health, about a nurse-led medical services provision in custody. There's a lot of people rounding up in custody not because they're really committing crime, or if they are committing crime, it's because of their vulnerabilities, drug abuse and alcohol abuse. And their healthcare inequalities have not been signposted or given any health support or any social services support, so keep ending up in my custody suite. So, there's now a shared piece going forward that if we can get better healthcare and social service provision to those people, there'll be an A&E less, there'll be in custody less, there'll be committing less crime. So that work will continue in the background, but in the meantime, we'll be crashing out to people when they need us.
Yeah, I think just a brief word on that. I've seen areas where the police services tried to define their remit in terms of we won't do these things anymore. That's normally a bit of a recipe for disaster. So, and Andy certainly comments in the Police Foundation report about seeing colleagues step in. We're the sort of organisations that step in and then have the conversations about how we're going to fix this. I think it's always a risk where you fail to step in, people come to harm, communities get on the back of that pretty quickly, and the relationship starts to break down.
Okay, thank you. Before we go to the question, I've been passed a question which we received on Twitter, and it's for the panel. I could feel the nervousness coming now.
Do you want to tweet back?
I'm very mindful of the people that we have online listening, but it's a question about bringing PCSOs into the equation, and I think it's in the back, Gavin, of you mentioning the drive in England and Wales at that time and the offer of 21,000 and then 18, how many do you need? And I appreciate that was in a different time, but we don't have PCSOs here.
Yeah, sure.
So maybe you'd said about a scene in terms of the value they bring to community engagement, neighbourhood policing, and maybe just a PSNI view on that very briefly.
Yeah, and I would say this because I'm the National League of the Chief Counsel for PCSOs as well, so you'd expect me to be a real strong advocate of them. So I think it is a real benefit that we've got in England and Wales. Of course, early on in the implementation, we faced all sorts of questions about, they're not really police, they're plastic police, and lots of disparaging comments. Actually, whenever I go out on patrol with the PCSO, they never cease to amaze me with the amount of insight that they've got into local community issues. And that's largely because they're less likely to get abstracted to other duties than police officers do, because, when, a big sporting event happens or some emergency response, then of course police officers they've got to step in to help out with that. Generally speaking, PCSOs get left there to build those longer term relationships, and we see great benefit from that. Of course, if you haven't got that model and you can't do it, and I've seen this elsewhere as well, then there's no reason why that can't be done through another agency as well. So I've seen incredibly successful community warden schemes, volunteering schemes that are essentially based on the same principle: a consistent presence to engage in an area, to understand the issues that are most affected them, have a really good information exchange with the local policing services that are there.
Okay, Alan, you could probably maybe comment more in terms of the different models that we have here, obviously led by PCSPs, but do you want to come in on that?
I can remember we even had the uniform design for PCSOs here, but it never actually happened. I can still remember sitting at a presentation one day. So we were pretty close to having them.
We were at the lunch.
Yeah. I do think, and the piece that Gavin's touched on, we do have successful community warden schemes operating in some parts of Northern Ireland, and I think that's something we should be looking at to the future. We would actually, joining up 3 or 4 of the questions we've been asked here today and some of the answers that have been given back, that piece about concern hubs, multi-agency, how we use that service provision, how we involve communities, and how we get community-based policing from the non-statutory sector in through that place to work alongside police. I think community wardens as an opportunity, and we do have some successful schemes. That sort of community involvement through community wardens and that volunteering piece sits in that world, and I think that's what we should be looking at, because I think there's much more potential there than going back and revisiting the PCSO argument, which I think for us, given the cost differentials, the threats, the armed environment we work in, I just don't think we'll ever deliver. So I actually think we should be looking in another direction, which is much more around community involvement, community partnership, through concern hubs into community wardens would be a much more fruitful avenue to get to the same place.
Okay, thank you. Just by way of final questions, Barbara, and then we have Michael O'Hara. There was a question at the back, but I thought I feeling you might have left.
I'm going to do a bit of an Albert with two, I promise I won't. We've been having these conversations for quite a while, as a lot of the people in the area, in the room will know. I'm Barbara Groom from Sinn Féin, West Belfast. The conversation started off sounding like everybody wanted local engagement, just wanted mindless, aimless wandering about visibility in the street. Or on the other hand, the specialisms that people were moving towards being something that didn't impact in the community space. I think the discussions have brought us all to a place where it's now much more nuanced. Each time I come to these discussions, I hear more than I heard the last time. I heard myself when you referred to if police are still doing, neighbourhood police are still doing X or Y, they still won't have time to engage, since that was one of the questions I asked the last time. While I understand that you're doing a lot in terms of A&E and in terms of, for example, children missing from care or custody, all of which are really important. One of the other things we heard of before, and you can tell me whether it's still a problem, is that when police are responding to some of the non-urgent, when they come back, the amount of time they have to fill in the same information, different formats into different, is also hugely time, takes up an awful lot of time, and this isn't something you have to rely on another agency for. So are there examples of where you have done work on that to allow people to have more time to engage? Because if you don't, then it is true, even if you do some of the discussions that we're having at the moment in terms of neighbourhood police taking on not so much of the urgent responses, but some of the other things that we all understand is what neighbourhood police will do. They still won't have time to do the advanced problem solving and engagement that's needed. That's all one question. The second question was, I heard Alan saying there about the crime ops specialist support to my area. That's the first time that I've heard that so much as support for my area and as opposed to something that needs to happen instead of neighbourhood policing and community policing. So I'd be interested to hear more of that, so more exactly what it is that people in various sections of whether it's operations support or crime ops do that specifically support the work that your people are doing. Does that make sense?
I think so. Well, I'll try and answer it. You tell me the answer makes sense. In the order, as the reason is I have two Barbaras in my eyeline here, so just be careful. Barbara Gray and I met with a small team that's established within the change team in DPC to look at the bureaucracy issues and the paperwork and duplication piece. So, we are in the business of finding space in officers' days to do all the things we talked about, and that clearly includes the paperwork issue. We're just going to put our hands up to that in due course and say some of this we choose to do for ourselves, and therefore we can choose not to do it, and we just make some choices around that. But Barbara and I had an initial meeting with the team on the initial findings, and we'll be setting up a small multidisciplinary team to look at how we take that forward, because you've got to take work off people to create space for the rest of the things that we've done. So that's not lost on us, Barbara, and we've done a significant amount of scoping around that, and Barbara Gray and I are progressing the work in the background of that. The second piece, I don't think it's the first time I've ever seen it that way. I mean, we are a collective senior management team. I absolutely know from a number of hats and a number of levels in the organisation, from being an operational top right through being a commander and on the senior team, that there are a whole range of specialisms that if they don't work well, then neighbourhood policing doesn't function. Some of that is common across the UK, and Gavin will have experienced that. Others more Northern Ireland specific, but you know, we have had, I think, some conversations over time about, you know, maybe we could spend less on national security and intelligence, and we could take some of those savings and spend it on neighbourhood policing. The truth of it is, if our decision-making model, which is fed with community information and intelligence at the top, doesn't function well, and we don't understand the threat and risk that people face, then we get a high-threat environment which an officer can't function. So the whole intelligence and the whole safety of society generally also makes a safer environment for neighbourhood policing to operate in. And if we don't, there are people who would seek to do police officers harm, and if we don't manage that, then we can't effectively manage our people's confidence to go out and engage with communities and do the work to make those communities safer. And so I think that goes hand in hand. And then there's a whole range of specialist works. You know, we talk about, sometimes I think we fall into the trap of talking about crime operations like they don't work in every, crime operations savings people work in every district and every locale up and down Northern Ireland every day. So the relationship has to be really strong between the local neighbourhood team where those operations are taking place and the needs of serious and organised crime or murder investigations or counter-terrorism organisations. And we have to meet those through taking a community impact assessment with local knowledge and understanding the local impact and shape our operations so that we deliver that in a way which makes sense to the local neighbourhood police who can engage with those people. And sometimes we get that right, sometimes we get it wrong, and our accountability structures are like people in this room, we challenge us back to do it better next time. But that is, you know, I see very much that those specialisms work through local areas. When, no matter how big an operation is, when somebody gets arrested or a house gets searched, it happens on a house or a street somewhere in one district. And that's the sort of conversation we regularly have around the senior table as a team, and that's how we manage it.
Yeah. I think that's, sorry.
Just before, in case you're also answering the same question, I may have confused you by saying crime ops in general. I actually also meant C7 and the whole public protection, the domestic abuse.
Well, you know, I see many of these things as a, you know, whereas we can segment it. If you are a victim of domestic abuse, we talk about first on the scene. We ran a training and awareness package for our contact management centres called First on the Scene. That's to get the mindset of a call handler that they're the first member of PSNI to talk to the victim, and they're the first on the scene of the crime, and they should treat the person accordingly. Then you get an officer attending, and they'll do an assessment, they make an arrest if necessary, they gather evidence at the time, then they link into public protection branch, you bring a specialist investigation in alongside that, and PSNI as a team, when you add it all up, and we actually have these graphics for our own people so they understand that, you know, CSI might get called, which is a branch of Mark Hamilton's world, come out and take samples, forensic support piece around it, then you get referrals in through criminal justice branch and how files are fast-tracked through PTSD relationship. It's a continuum, and we're all part of one team, and we all own pieces at a time. But from my perspective, it all sort of starts in my world through contact management and first responder, and then we as an organisation wrap our specialisms around it to make sure that victim gets the service that they should, and where people have been guilty of offences that go before the courts, and that takes a multidisciplinary avenue right. And Barbara's piece wraps around that because Barbara has a significant amount of specialist resources in terms of search, arrest, and the operations going that as well. So these are regular conversations that we join up, and that is in ethos a range of our business functions across the organisation working in a police and community model.
Gavin, can I ask you just very briefly to come in? I'm conscious of time and I do want to take the last question. Can I ask you to come in, because you did mention this in your opening comments where you talked about a national security incident and connecting quickly into neighbourhood policing, which I think is really that sense of not seeing neighbourhood policing in isolation and not links with even just the value that's placed on it as integrated within a police service. So if you want to comment on that and anything else by way of Barbara's questions, just very briefly, and then we'll move to Michael O'Hara.
Yeah, I very much see it the same way as Alan, in that you've got to view it as that continuum, in that you need that protective environment to allow us to police freely, and of course we need to get that confidence to allow teachers to teach and doctors to administer care and so on. So it's all about connecting that neighbourhood to the national level and everything in between. Very brief example of that in my own patch. Problem with burglaries that local communities are needing, that needs volunteers to deliver the crime prevention packs and smart water property marketing kits. It needs the neighbourhood officers to identify those that are most vulnerable. It needs the specialist teams to recognise that actually they were foreign national offenders operating out of London in hire cars. with sat navs with postcodes on it, just saying go and over that area, and then a team to tackle that. And the range of services needs to come together to solve that particular problem. On the time saving capacity, the one thing that we've had most benefit out over the last few years is the introduction of two things: mobile data, which my officers tell me that they get probably an hour and a half to 2 hours back every day from good effective use of mobile data. And the second thing is something that we call safety net, which is a multi-agency case management system which tries to avoid that double keying and make it easier to share information between the different agencies involved.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to take our last question to Michael. Michael, was really interested.
After all that, most of the questions have been answered, so I'm not sure I've got a question or just a statement. But one, if we're going to increase confidence in policing, okay, the primary answer and the message is not to do it, is that we won't have the resource to do it. We won't have the resource for neighbourhood policing. I know a lot of good answers that we've given here is what's available. I think that we need to be maximising all the other areas where we can't, like PCSPs, are they being as effective as they should be, and if they're not, how can we be doing more? And particularly the voluntary sector, there's a massive voluntary sector out there, and I'm sure at very low cost we could plug some of those gaps. Some of the improvements that Alan talked about, the nurse-led healthcare model in custody, that we put £3 million back in the budget, so let's get that implemented right away. Final just comment from me is I'm very encouraged to hear about collaborative problem solving that would involve everybody. It's a very effective tool, but it has to be deployed properly. So my question, and one and only question, would be, what are the plans to roll out some training on problem solving, particularly for the community involvement aspect of it?
Two things I'll touch on there, Michael. There's an absolute opportunity, I think, for PCSPs. You know, we've developed a concept, started in Derry City and Strabane Council area, with the concern hub we now have. We're moving to our fifth. Moving to our fifth one, going live shortly. I think we need to look at how many we need to have, but the concept sound, I think we need to extend it into the non-statutory space. But I actually think it's custom made for PCSP involvement to mainstream PCSPs and the partners in service delivery and joint decision making, joint problem solving, and that locally based prioritisation and demand reduction. So I think that space is really, really ripe for that debate, and I look forward to that coming out of the consultation working with Amanda, members of the board and others, and how we might shape that, because I think if you're going to predict the future, I think you should have a plan to design it. The other point on problem solving piece, that actually we have done a significant amount of work in the last 12 or 18 months under the Policing Community Programme Board, which I chaired, David manages, and actually it's quite impressive when you see all the trainings put together, but it's been a substantial amount. David can't really tell me how many officers, but we are well across a high percentage of local policing team officers have completed or are scheduled to complete that problem solving training, and that's been ongoing for 12 or 18 months.
Gavin, last word to you. 30 seconds.
I think the service nationally has recognised this issue of problem solving as well. So there's some national transformation money gone into a problem solving and demand reduction programme. It's led through South Yorkshire, big input from Durham, who've been sort of leaders in the field, and in fact they've extended an open invitation to support anybody that wants help in that work, and they're looking to develop some national products which I'm sure will help all of us in due course.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I just thank everybody for their participation? What I would say, I hope everybody got asking a question. I was very mindful there were quite a lot today. If you didn't get a chance to ask a question, a number of people will be about afterwards and we'll be happy to talk to you, so do feel free to come up with